setting the same. I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to
Hey guys.
One for the screen, one for her.
So chaotic. Evan is chaotic, not you.
He's chaotic. I'm gonna be honest. This will be a different experience than with James because he is very tech savvy. He would be here, but he's on vacation at Disney World with his family. So
Doesn't want to do a training.
no.
What's
So you
that?
guys are just gonna have to bear with me.
Mm,
I promise to participate if you need group participation.
Thanks. I am gonna ask that. I'm asking a little bit more for group participation today. So
Okay, I'll help you out.
thanks.
Welcome.
We're gonna wait a few more minutes as people are jumping on here. Hey, Bakers. Schweitzers, I missed you somehow in my screen too. I think Susan's coming, so I was gonna wait for a few minutes to see if she jumped on.
Do you want me to text her?
Yeah, that'd be great. We might just start our spiel without Susan, and hopefully she'll catch up on our little initial part here. If you were jumping on, as I was saying that, James isn't here tonight. He's usually our tech guy, really good at it, but he is at Disney World with his family. So bear with Ronnie and I as we try to make sure that you guys get all the videos and all the slides that you're supposed to be seeing. So if there's something that you aren't seeing or you can't hear something, let me know and we'll take a brief pause. It's recording this as well so that we can train other people based on these videos if they jump in trainings later. This session specifically is going to be on poverty and care communities, and there are some instances where we're asking questions of you and there's some self-reflection. And so if you happen to have like a piece of scratch paper nearby or a pen, just so you don't have to try to remember those things in your head, now would be a great time to go and grab those if you don't already have it right beside you. And then if you do, based on that, last week was a lot of just teaching and videos. This week is going to be a little bit more interactive. And so there are activities with it. We have a there's a homework assignment at the end, one article to read quick, and then kind of an activity that goes off of our care community piece, which is basically just writing down and thinking through who is in your care community. Ronnie, any updates from Susan?
Nothing yet.
Okay. We're just going to proceed on then. All right,
Okay.
so first we're going to look at poverty. And we're going through poverty today because there's going to be a lot of the families that we're working with who are living in poverty and coming from poverty. I'm going to preface ahead of time that none of this is taken from a lot of different agencies who have done a lot of different research on the aspect of poverty. They have a lot of great trainings. Nothing that we talk about is going to fit every single scenario. So this is a generalized conception, in the same way that I don't want you making drastic generalized perceptions about others around you. We're making this generalized perception, but we know that there is wiggle room for individuals who might come through the program who might not fall specifically in some of these categories that we're putting out here. These are just supposed to be helpful for you in just gaining some perspective on possibly where these families are coming from, and give you tools on how to best support the kids and families that you're in contact with. So in our communities, we have differences and divisions in our society that I would say, especially in the last couple of years, have been pretty inescapable, right? So we have a lot of perceptions of, at least for me, I'm like, are we falling apart, or are we coming together? What does this really look like? So I don't want this to just be an exercise like in poverty. I want us really thinking about what are our human interactions that we're doing on the day-to-day, reflecting on who are the people that we are spending time with, who are the people that we are talking with, what do our daily choices look like, what are our habits, who are we surrounding ourselves with, what are our attitudes, and possibly shifting, right? What does that look like to put ourselves outside of that comfort zone? So if you're thinking about your day-to-day interactions, who are the people that you're looking at on social media? Who are the people that you're surrounding yourself with? Are you surrounding yourself with people that think like you, that talk like you talk, that believe that the same things that you do, shop the same places that you shop, vote the same way that you vote, any of those things? I'm hoping that you're thinking yes, right? Because we gravitate towards our comfort zones. So we gravitate towards what we're comfortable with, but then the problem is that creates this huge gap. And when we have this big gap between us and we don't understand other people because they're not who we're around all the time, we have a divide that we start to make assumptions. We start to think a certain way about a certain thing. And so that sometimes can be detrimental in again, bringing everybody together, right? Like we just get further and further apart. And so I want us to really try to think about what are the things, how can we think differently? Because we are firm believers that relationships are the things that can bridge those gaps, right? Like if we go outside of our comfort zone to have a relationship with somebody who's on the other side of that divide, that's a great place to start. So all of what we're looking at here is from the lens of relationship. We are trying to bridge that gap, that divide, where we were probably going to be outside of our comfort zone. So we're going to talk about dignity and value of people who are living in poverty, how we can gain a different perspective, how we can help remove barriers, And then what does it look like to do with instead of doing for? Okay, so for dignity and value, this one's the interactive part, which I said it's going to be a little bit more hands-on communication. You can unmute yourselves if you so desire, if there's not lots of children in the background making lots of noise. Don't feel like, again, don't feel like you have to unmute yourself indefinitely, but it'll just create an easier space here for conversation. So dignity, when somebody says the word dignity, what do you guys all think of?
I think of like a feeling of self-worth and ability to do the things you're doing.
Absolutely.
Dignity for me, I feel like that means, you know, to have integrity in everything that you do.
For sure.
I'm thinking the word respect, respecting yourself, respecting others, respecting boundaries.
I love that you said respect, Susan, because those are really closely tied to each other. And so coming up here in a few minutes, we're going to have a video about dignity and respect. So, I mean, we kind of came up with 4 ideas that summarize a lot of what you guys just said, but dignity is, it's a feeling that's in your core. It's a belief in the worth of others. It's a belief in your own worth, and it's a belief that you matter. So dignity means that you're valued and that you're important and that you matter and your voice matters and that you're wanted, just the same as any other human being. So slight difference from all of what I just said there in the realm of dignity and respect is that respect is something that's earned. Dignity is not. Dignity exists purely because God gave it to us, right? Human dignity originates from God and it's of God because we're all made in God's image and likeness. So I don't have to earn that. You don't have to earn that. People can try to take that away from us, but nobody actually can because God's the one who gave it to us. So from that aspect, I want us thinking of dignity from that realm, just from the beginning, right? And human life is sacred then because the human person is the most central and clearest reflection of God. So if we're reminding ourselves of that, even in those really hard moments, it's a lot easier to do that respect piece, right? To value their integrity when we know that everybody is in their worth, hitting on all of your guys' things, right? When we know that all of that is coming from God. So here's
Libby, that makes me think of the scene in Prince of Egypt when after he turned the seat or the river to blood and he's talking to all the Jewish people, which is what I thought of when you said dignity, but I didn't realize it was actually in the Bible.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I love that. So here's that brief video kind of, I mean, again, talking about dignity and respect and what's that line difference between the two.
It's a good question.
Respect means to be kind.
Respect is something you pay towards others.
Doing as you're told.
Being respectful to others, respecting space.
Respecting your elders.
Appreciating, honoring others' views.
Knowing how
So if you're respecting somebody, you're giving them the ability to be dignified.
I don't know. Be humble and be nice to other people.
Dignity is something that you look for in yourself.
It's really hard because it's close to respect.
I heard of it before and then I forgot.
Understanding of who you are and how you should be treated.
It is totally understandable why people, no matter how old they are, don't know what dignity and respect actually mean. It's one of those words people think they know, but actually it's really confusing. At Cultures of Dignity, we define these words in the following way. So respect comes from the word respectus in Latin, which means to look through and to look at how somebody has achieved the things that they have. And dignity from the Latin means dignitas, which really means to be worthy. And you can't have your worth taken away from you, even though it is a reality that people might try.
When we have dignity as the baseline understanding of how we see people, we are then able to build upon with trust, a sense of belonging, and that's what we need in our schools, that's what we need in our homes, that's what we need in our workplaces.
The way that we address it is this. Showing someone respect is actually treating them with dignity. And if you can treat them with dignity, you know in your heart that even if they're abusing power, even if they're doing things that you cannot respect because of the way they're treating people, you still always treat that person with worth.
Okay, so separate, right, from how we're looking at other people's worth and making sure that we're honoring their dignity, I want us to realize and recognize our own dignity and our own value and our own self-worth, because that's what empowers us to be able to do. I mean, like, being a host home isn't easy because people are messy. And so I want to make sure that you guys know what all your dignity allows you and empowers you to do. So when our dignity is honored, we have a better ability to navigate complex and difficult worlds. We're able to help and protect other people. We can become a change maker. We can transform our own communities and the world. We can cultivate resilience and inner strength. So some of those things then feed into what are fundamental human needs that we all have. One of those is safety, so both physical and physiological security, and psychological, sorry. Autonomy, so power over our environments and our circumstances. A connection to others, and that's a close personal relationship. So one that allows us to share emotions and be in community with each other. A sense of purpose, so goals that give our lives meaning. I'm gonna have us, everybody look at this one more time quick before we go to our activity. So thinking about these 5 things, so safety, autonomy, or 4, connection to others, purpose, we're gonna do an activity. So with all of these things in mind, I want you guys to think about a time when your dignity and your needs were honored. So what happened when your dignity and needs were honored? How did that make you feel? So your worth, your identity, you felt valued, you felt seen, you felt heard, right? How did you feel? Why do you think you felt that way? And then what did you do? I'm gonna let everybody think for a second. If I asked you, which I am gonna ask you next, but if I ask you the question first of when was a time when your dignity wasn't honored, is that an easier question for you all to answer? Right? I feel like we all can think of that one pretty fast. Like, when was a time when that wasn't honored? Okay, so specifically, I would say for me, and I don't know if this helps you like think to get the ball rolling, but I have because I love to help, right? I have a hard time sometimes saying no to people. I usually am like, yes, I will make it work. You know, I can bend over backwards to do that. But sometimes I am saying that, not always out of my own, realizing my own dignity and value, right? Like sometimes it's like, oh, even though I know that it's already finished, right? Like Jesus said, it's finished. It's not kind of sort of halfway done if I do X, Y, or Z. You know, there's still a part of me, right, that sometimes is like, ooh, what's my motivation actually behind not saying no in this situation? So if somebody else sees, right, that I'm on the edge and I'm like, oh yeah, I can make that work, and they respect me and value and honor my dignity and say, I know that you can make this work, but like, actually, I think you should take a break. Like, we've got this, we'll take care of it, no problem. And when somebody else sees that, right, I feel so seen and so understood, because I'm like, oh yeah, they know me. They know where that shortfall is in me, right? And they know that I still have worth and value regardless of what I do or don't do. Again, I don't know if that prompted anything for any of you of what a time that your dignity was honored or your needs were met.
I guess I was going to say, when I was in school, I had to do a lot of different clinical rotations, and it would change every month. And it was the people that would just make you feel kind of at home in that certain area. And they know new people. They knew, I mean, it was common, new people started every 30 days. So, because it's just how the rotation would go. And so when you felt respected and they understood, like, you didn't know where the simple things were, and they just took time out of their day to make you feel comfortable, that definitely helped with your dignity.
I love that. And that's something where you're feeling like you're not in control, right? And you don't know all the things. So that's so cool.
I think someone who showed me dignity before is actually Ronnie's sister quite a bit. I worked with her pretty closely in WHAM, and she would oftentimes stop me and tell me, like, I think you need to like assess what you are saying yes to, because your time is more valuable than you seem to like portray. And also just like validating feelings when I'm feeling upset about something, and kind of like telling myself that like I'm just being emotional about it or whatever. She would help put context to it. It's like, no, like you shouldn't be treated this way. Like, and here's how to think about it or whatever. But she was good at that.
I love that. Ronnie's pretty good at that too. So it must be a family trait.
Yeah, seriously.
Right now, the job I'm in, I'm embedded inside a doctor's office, and everyone there is so, how can you help us? And thank you for doing so. And it's my job, but it's validating and empowering and grateful. And it makes me want to do more for them, help them do more.
I get that, Susan. My job prior to being part of Families Together, I was in the Beyond Prison program. And so my job took me into correctional facilities where I got to teach classes and do a lot of interacting with a very marginalized population, a group of people that do not see kindness and do not see evidence that they have dignity. They're put down frequently and not, they're dehumanized frequently. And I think probably a time that frequent times where my dignity was recognized was when I would go into prison, and after treating inmates with kindness and compassion and care and in a dignified way, that was always reciprocated. They would always honor me and verbalize their appreciation for that.
Okay, I feel like we've had quite a few. I want us to think about those emotions. And now I'm going to ask you, when was a time when your dignity was violated? And maybe your ability to fulfill your needs was limited. What happened? How did you feel? Why do you think you felt that way? And what did you do? Again, this one I felt, I mean, it's really easy, I feel, on my end at least.
Everybody's microphones just simultaneously turned on.
At work, I have a pretty strange role with department silos, where I fall under the authority of 2 department heads and only one of them knows what my job is supposed to be. So there's a lot of conflict with the other department head. And so I often get emails talking about how what I'm doing is inappropriate and breaking the rules, that are just so disheartening because I'm not breaking the rules. And it just, like, when I get those, it's really hard to function and be there for my students and like be a good person. Like, successfully be a person, not be a good person, but successfully be a person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm an externalizer and a runner away. So I often run away from how I feel until it all vomits out.
I call the vomit part like the volcano, right? It's, except for mine is internal. So I stuff it and then it explodes.
There's a children's book called My Mouth is a Volcano, which is really good to talk about this topic if anyone needs one.
Do you want to bring it next week and we can add it to part of our training, maybe? I come from a history of domestic violence, and talk about zapping your dignity. The emotional attacks and even the physical attacks, that there's nothing to wipe out dignity by having somebody else literally controlling you physically and threatening you. And then you're not sure that you can get your needs met, and you feel hopeless and you feel totally defeated.
I'm pretty good with awkward silence. So if we need to sit on it longer because you guys want to share, I'm happy to do that. But also give me a head nod if you're like, I'm not a sharer with large groups of people that I don't know yet, because you don't really know any of us yet. I respect that too.
I think it's so frustrating to get emails like what Alyssa is talking about, or people say like, you did this thing, you wronged me, shame on you, you didn't follow this rule that I didn't actually communicate. Like they kind of rip you a new one, and then you have no avenue to like fight your case or say like, hey, what is the background of this, or like what like grounds do you think that you have for this, in a respectful way of saying like, I don't think this is justified. But I resonate with that with some people that I've worked with before, of just kind of throwing you under the bus in a very unjustified way. And it's just, it doesn't feel good. It's not a fulfilling feeling. But or like Susan was saying, working in an environment where you're constantly like gratified. Like I'm kind of like you, Libby. I offer to do too much too often. Yeah, whatever. And it's nice when people are very thankful, but it's not so nice when you do it and their only response is, oh, well, I need you to also come tonight. And I also like need you to come tomorrow. And then you say, well, I don't think I can do that tomorrow. And then they say, are you serious? Like, you know, whatever. It's completely 180 when someone is not thankful or grateful, or doesn't see how much you're sacrificing to do what you're doing.
And like Ronnie said, when you respect other people's sense of dignity, it's so much easier for us to come back with enthusiasm and like respecting their dignity even more. Let's just be nice people to each other, and then everyone can be nice people.
And Libby, I just shared I told Alyssa about when you had picked up the kids, their first placement early, and two of them had missed their meds and they were losing their minds, and you're driving them back early, and you're like, it's okay, I can just drive them around town and distract them for 2.5 hours and whatever. And I was like, no, you're not gonna have these 3 kids whacking your head in the car for 3 hours hyped up on Doritos and fruit snacks.
Yeah, they were really dysregulated. I mean, I had one that just went like this, pushing the light on and off in the back the whole time.
Yeah.
They were really dysregulated. Okay, this is last call if anybody else has something. Otherwise, I'll go to the next one.
Jennifer, you're leaning forward. Did you want to say something? Did you want to share?
No, I'm fine. I just leaning forward. But I will just say, I'm glad we're talking about it, because I run a business where I manage a number of people, and I try to kind of, something that I pride myself in is that I'm really good about, well, I think I am about respecting and dignifying people, and they don't always notice that. And so it's just a nice topic to bring to the forefront to remember. And that's all.
It'll be really easy for you then. I love when people are already great at this, right? Because we're like, okay, this is great. We're talking about it. It's a good reminder. It's not as hard.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk really briefly on the 10 essential elements of dignity. So when we're honoring someone's dignity, these are the things that, I mean, essentially we've all kind of touched on these with our emotions and our stories, but what we're really doing, we're accepting their identity. So that doesn't always, identity is a word in today's realm, right? Which can sometimes be a trigger word. Identity in this concept is, I'm saying that we're accepting them where they're at. We're meeting them wherever they are. You know, the people who call us and want to use this program, sometimes they're Christians and sometimes they're not. And so that means holding them to a level of like, if they're not a Christian, right? I'm not holding them to a Christian standard of expectations of what they should or shouldn't be doing. Because again, they're in crisis. So, and I know Ronnie specifically, I think has maybe some some thoughts on this one before I go on to the next one?
Sure, and I apologize. I've got a lawnmower buzzing back and forth behind me, so I apologize for the noise behind me. Yeah, I mean, seriously, what comes to mind when we say identity? What's the big buzzword right now with identity? Gender identity. And the reality is, because a mom has children does not mean that she is not what the world considers straight. Because a mother, I mean, one of the moms that we've served recently. So I'll also share this. I have a daughter who is, I guess she identifies herself as bisexual, and she is married. I have an additional daughter-in-law that I never expected to have. And I mentioned this to the mom that we worked with recently. And a couple of weeks later, she said, you know, I feel so much more comfortable talking to you because I'm bi. And people don't accept that from me. You know, if I tell people that, they look at me funny and they don't want anything to do with me because, well, that's a sin. And I know it's a sin, but I don't know. It's just the way I am. Now, it's not my job to judge. It's my job to walk alongside and to encourage. And I have made some choices with my oldest daughter, and in the realm inside a church, those choices are debatable. My goodness, you're communicating with her and her wife. Is that, I mean, aren't you condoning their sin? And my perspective has become the only way that my daughter and her wife are going to come to know Christ is if somebody who is a Christ follower actually shows them love, accepts where they're at, and acknowledges their dignity. And that does not always happen. That's my choice. That's the direction that God has taken me. And it has also served me well in my career and in my jobs, working with in this program, obviously, also working in the prison. You know, let's talk about healthy relationships, period. Not healthy relationships with an individual of the opposite gender. So identity comes in a whole lot of things. Also, we're gonna run across a whole lot of individuals who have serious drug and alcohol issues. And that's where they're at right now. I love the way Libby prefaced this, accepting them where they are in crisis, they are in need. Recently, I was told of a situation where there was a dying man who told somebody that he was ready to hear the gospel. And so that somebody grabbed another man and they went to the home of the dying man. Walked in, and the first thing they started talking about was how homosexuality was a sin. At which point this dying man's husband escorted them out of the house, and the gospel was never shared. If we're not ready to accept where people are at, we can trip over our judgments, and we lose the ability to share with others.
And this one, I want to preface, I realize this is a tough space. All of us have personal convictions at different lines of this, right? And so this is a matter of meeting parents or kids where they're at. If you have, I mean, we ask questions, obviously, to try to help pair kids appropriately or to the best of our ability with host homes. But it's a possibility that we might have a kid who is struggling with, I mean, we have a world who's telling us, right? That even as kids, we can make these choices. So we might have a child who's confused and making choices that look different than what a typical child that age would be wrestling with or working through. And if that's something that is a trigger for you, if it's something that you're like, I don't know how to work through this, and you accidentally end up with a child in your home because I can't prepare you ahead of time for it because I don't know, right? If that's an instance, you have the ability that you can call me and we can talk through, what does this look like? How can we support you so that you know how you can best support the child in, again, just meeting them where they are. A lot of that goes back to, right, like our dignity. All of those instances where we felt honored and dignified was when somebody met us where we were at, regardless of where that was. Our next one is just recognizing everyone's unique qualities. So we all have gifts. All of our gifts just look different. And I'm so thankful that we're all very different people, right? Because we make the world a lot more interesting and we can get a whole lot more done. We definitely wouldn't want a whole lot of me's in the world. We need a good combo, right? We need a good mix. We want you to acknowledge somebody who we're working with, right? So just acknowledging someone, saying their name, that brings dignity and value. You feel seen. Including them. That the preface of this is talking generally, right? Including, if we're talking including our parents of kids while you have the parent or the kids in your home, there's a level of boundaries, right? Evan and I both struggle sometimes with boundaries. And so it's good and healthy and appropriate that you don't actually have to include them in every single moment of your life while you have kids in your home, because you also are trying to manage your own lives, right? There are things that your families have, you have rhythms, you have things that you have to get to, you have things your kids have to get to. And so we're not saying that you have to all of a sudden, these have to be like an addition to your family in the realm of parents, right? Because we need healthy and appropriate boundaries. But what does it look like to include someone when that's the possibility? And then making them feel safe. So that safety is one of those innate human needs, right? That we all have from the moment that we're born, right? The question that a baby is asking themselves, they're not saying out loud, is, am I safe? That's when they cry, right? They're not feeling safe for some reason. So how do we help make people feel safe? How do we make sure that we treat them fairly? Keep in mind, this doesn't mean that fairly that everybody across the board gets exactly the same thing, because we're all different with those unique qualities. So fairly means that we're making sure that everybody's getting what they need, right? So we're fair in that aspect. Giving them a sense of freedom. So we don't want anybody, and I'm sure that in your instances, you didn't feel super dignified, right? In some of your stories, if you thought that you had freedom and people weren't acknowledging that you actually had the freedom to make those choices within safe and healthy contexts. Seek understanding. So a lot of times, right, when we're not honoring dignity, it's because we're missing something. We're not understanding each other. We're not communicating well. So a lot of it is just asking questions. Giving someone the benefit of the doubt. So usually what happens is that people in general don't usually have ill intent. We often just miss the mark, and I think differently. And Ronnie thinks differently, right? So Ronnie and I might have something where Ronnie says something and it's totally, she's just viewing it a completely different way. She didn't mean it to be hurtful. But if I take that personally, right, without looking through Ronnie's lens, I might be like, oh, she had ill intent. And then I'm going to let bitterness and resentment grow. And then I'm probably not showing Ronnie dignity in my conversations with her, right? So giving everyone that benefit of the doubt. And then apologizing and taking responsibility. So this one is another tricky one, because I'm not saying here that you necessarily did something wrong. I'm saying in those instances where Ronnie and I miscommunicated, and something that was totally safe and appropriate and normal, right, got interpreted in a different way. And so if I hurt someone, whether that is unintentionally or intentionally, physical or with my words, I need to acknowledge that and take responsibility, just purely for the fact, like, wow, that was a miscommunication. I am so sorry that I hurt you with my words. Or I am so sorry. Ronnie has a story of possibly even just physically, unintentionally. So
my story is has a small amount of truth in it. Okay, I just want to clarify. It's got this much truth in it. All right. So Libby and I have been friends for years and years and years and years and years. That's not true. Okay, just clarifying. But I don't know if you've noticed, I'm a little bit older than Libby. And so when Libby and I became friends, she was like a youth. She was just an obnoxious teenager, really. And so Libby and I started doing this thing, and she started it because she was an obnoxious teenager, where if she would see me in a public place, she would just randomly sneak up behind me and boom, whap me on the shoulder and say, Ronnie, how are ya? And I figured, two can play this game. So if I'd see her first, boom, Libby, how are ya? And that went on for years. Well, one early spring day, gorgeous, like 80-degree weather, and it had been a crappy, cold, yucky winter, and it's 80 degrees. And Libby grabs her suit and she heads to the beach, and she spent the entire day at the beach. Libby did not bring her sunscreen. And Libby enjoyed the beach all day. Matter of fact, she fell asleep like that. How does Libby feel the next day?
I hurt, Ronnie.
Yeah, she wasn't feeling good. And it was like back down in the 50s, as Nebraska springs often do. And she went to the grocery store wearing a sweatshirt, and guess what? I saw her first. And I snuck up behind her and I went, boom, hey, Libby, how are ya? What do you suppose Libby's response was, and how do you suppose Libby felt about me in that moment? We're shaking heads.
I can tell you, I didn't feel great.
Yeah. There's probably anger, right? Because anger is a response to pain frequently. Did I really do anything wrong?
No, not to your knowledge.
No, I didn't do anything wrong.
Also, yeah, there's no ill intent.
There was no ill intent. But I hurt Libby, right? When we hurt somebody, even if there was no ill intent, if we discover that we've caused pain, we need to take responsibility, and we need to apologize. Now, I want to assure you that I never smacked Libby's sunburn. That's never happened. But it does give a great example of sometimes we need to apologize, even if we did not actually intentionally hurt somebody, in order to build a relationship, in order to show dignity. Sometimes we have to recognize that we do see things differently, and sometimes unintentionally our words hurt.
And that's our perfect segue into sometimes we see things differently.
So I need y'all to unmute your computers again. And I went upstairs in our office. I'm at our office, and I stole one of Libby's mugs here. I need y'all to help describe this mug to me.
Inconvenient.
It what?
Who drinks coffee out of a mug that size?
That's why it's upstairs, Evan, because I don't want to drink from
Yeah.
that at home.
Audacious. No. Blue, springy.
It's blue and springy. Good. Somebody else.
It's Libby's.
It's Libby's mug. Yes. What else?
I thought it was Ronnie's mug.
I stole it from Libby.
Oh,
I don't drink coffee at all. So
And
so some of you have met me, some of you have not. I haven't made it to 5 foot tall yet. And my phone's ringing. I haven't made it to 5 foot tall yet. And so I don't drink coffee because I don't want it to stunt my growth and make me short. I want to be taller when I grow up. So I don't use things like this. What else do we see about this mug?
Ronnie, I see that it has a handle.
Thank you, Libby. It has a handle. It has a handle. So from what you're seeing, it is the way I'm holding it, is the handle on the left or the right?
Right.
It's on the right? No, it's not. It's on the left. How can you say it's on the right? It's on the left. It's clearly on the left.
but from our perspective, it's on the right.
Bingo. But the thing is, we see everything from a perspective, right? And I might see something. I mean, I say it's on the left. You're saying it's on the right. We're saying the exact opposite things, but we are all 100% accurate, right? Now, our perspective in life comes from our childhood, our personality, our beliefs, our values. All of these things impact our perspective. Almost all of our conflicts that we have in any relationship, whether it's a marriage relationship, a work relationship, a relationship with children, a relationship with a host or a family that we're hosting, almost all of our conflicts come out of a difference of, is the handle on the right or the left? It's all about perspective. My perspective personally comes from the fact that I'm the youngest of 3 girls. I don't have any brothers. Does that impact my perspective? Yeah, I'm a preacher's kid. I grew up in a little tiny town in western Nebraska. My graduating class was 27 kids. And there were no minorities in my school at all. All those things impact my perspective. I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I'm divorced. I'm remarried. I single parented for 10 years. All of those things impact my perspective. Unless you can go through that list and you have exactly all of the things that I just named, we are not going to see eye to eye on every topic. But obviously I'm right and you're wrong, right? Okay, maybe not, maybe not. The thing is, it doesn't make me righter or wronger. Some of my favorite are words. Yeah. It means that I see things from a different perspective. And if we're going to solve problems, and if we're going to solve some of these things that Libby was talking about and bring unity in our culture, or even just in our circle, we have to accept that everybody's perspective gives them a different view. And it's not wrong or right, it's simply different.
So on that note, Ronnie was talking about.
Yeah, let's talk about something else that's going to greatly impact our, let's go back to the previous for just a few minutes. Something that's going to greatly impact our kids, the perspective that the children that you're going to have in your home and the perspective of their parents is what we're going to call ACEs, ACE, and that stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. Has anybody, and you can just raise your hand or nod yes or no, have you heard of the ACEs study? Okay, there's a couple of you that have. So the ACEs study was done accidentally, and we're going to watch a video about how it kind of came to be, but it took place in the 90s, where they began to recognize the impact of adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs. And they picked very specific 10 adverse childhood experiences, and they looked at the impact that had specifically on an adult life. If you experienced these items as a child, these were likely outcomes. The majority of the children that we're going to work with have had adverse childhood experiences of some sort. And I think I have been loosely connected to Families Together for 2 years. And I've only seen one mom that I'm not sure that she had a very high ACE score. And I'll explain what the ACE score is here in a minute. Most of the moms that we are working with, the reason they are isolated, the reason they don't have supports, is closely connected to their ACE score. Also, we did TBRI last week. TBRI is built to help children with trauma that was caused by adverse childhood experiences. So what we're going to do, I know for a fact that our children are impacted by ACEs. I know for a fact that their parents are impacted by ACEs. And I'm guessing that we all have some impact on ACEs. We're going to do a quick run through of the ACEs, what's called the ACEs assessment. The ACEs assessment is a 10-question assessment. This is, and I didn't write these in when I made the slides this afternoon, but the ACEs assessment is, I'm going to ask you 10 questions. And this is, did these things happen to you before the age of 18? If it's a yes, you're going to mark a 1 or put a tally mark of a 1 on the piece of paper that you've got, or try, use your fingers, and it's only 10, so we don't have to use our toes today, just our fingers. So we're going to go through these and then we're going to talk about them. These are tough questions. If you find that they are triggering you, it's okay. If you need to walk away, that's okay. If you need to shut your video off for a little bit, that's okay. We want to be sensitive to you. And if after you've watched it and after we've taken the assessment and we've watched the video, if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to either Libby or I. We're happy to kind of walk you through what some of this means and what some options are. Okay, go ahead and hit the next slide. So the first one, again, this is 0 to age 18. Did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt? Number 2, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you, or ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured? Again, it's just, if that ever happened to you, it's just 1. All right, go ahead. Oh, you've already gotten to the next one. Look, she's ahead of things. Number 3, did an adult or person at least 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you or have you touch their body in a sexual way, or attempt to actually have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? Number 4, did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, or your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? Number 5, did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you, or that your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you or take you to the doctor if you needed it? Number 6, was a biological parent ever lost to you through divorce, abandonment, or other reasons? Number 7, was your mother or stepmother often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? Or was she ever repeatedly hit over at least a few minutes or threatened with a gun or knife? Number 8, did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic or used street drugs? And the last 2, number 9, was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? Number 10, did a household member ever go to prison or incarceration? We're going to watch a video that is going to explain why they asked this question. It's going to explain how they came across the need, what opened up the idea for this, and then why they asked the questions, why they chose these questions, and what the potential outcome of this is. And then we'll talk about it a little bit more after that.
What we found in the ACE study involving 17,500 middle-class adults was that life experiences in childhood that are lost in time and then further protected by shame and by secrecy and by social taboos against inquiry into certain realms of human experience, that those life experiences play out powerfully and proportionately a half century later in terms of emotional state, in terms of biomedical disease, in terms of life expectancy. In 1985, I first became interested in developmental life experiences in early childhood, really by accident. In the major obesity program we were running, a young woman came into the program. She was 28 years old and weighed 408 pounds. Asked us if we could help her with her problem, and in 51 weeks took her from 408 to 132, and thought, well, my God, we've got this problem licked. This is going to be a world famous department here. She maintained her weight at 132 for several weeks, and then in one 3-week period regained 37 pounds in 3 weeks, which I had not previously conceived as being physiologically possible. That was triggered by being sexually propositioned at work by a much older man, as she described him. And in short order, she was back over 400 pounds faster than she had lost the weight. I remember asking her why the extreme response, after initially claiming not to have any understanding of why the extreme response. Ultimately, she told me of a lengthy incest history with her grandfather from age 10 to age 21. Ultimately, it turned out that 55% of the people in our obesity program acknowledged a history of childhood sexual abuse. I mean, that obviously is not the only issue going on, but it was where we began. And as we went down that trail, then we discovered other forms of abuse, also growing up in massively dysfunctional households, etc. And the ACE study was really designed to see whether these things existed at all in a general population, and if so, how did they play out over time. We studied 10 categories of adverse life experience that were chosen because of their prevalence in the weight program. Childhood sexual abuse, heavy-duty childhood physical abuse, I'm not talking spanking, major emotional abuse, recurrent humiliation, 2 categories of neglect, growing up in a home where one of the members of the household was chronically depressed, suicidal, mentally ill, or in the state hospital, growing up in a home without both biological parents, growing up in a home where one of the members of your household was alcoholic or a drug user, growing up in a home where mother was beaten, growing up in a home where one of the members of your household was imprisoned during your childhood or adolescence. Those were the 10 categories. In a middle-class population, 1 in 11 people has experienced 6 or more of those adverse life experiences in childhood. So this is very common, totally unrecognized. It was difficult for us to accept their commonness, but on the other hand, these are issues that most people never touch. And so who would know without routinely asking? But at a so-called ACE score 6, experiencing any 6 of the 10 categories that we studied, that person was 4,600% more likely to become an IV drug user than a person who had experienced none of those 10 categories. Okay? Now, you think you read in the newspaper the latest cancer scare of the week, prostate cancer or breast cancer increases 30% and everyone goes nuts. I'm talking 4,600% increase. The same ACE score of 6 produces a likelihood of attempting suicide that is between 3,100 and 5,000% greater than the likelihood of suicide attempts in someone with none of those life experiences. So the power of this relationship is enormous. So ultimately the question arises, how do life experiences in childhood end up with disease states a half century later? There are at least 2 big categories to account for that. One is through the use of various coping devices. One smokes to feel better, one overeats to feel better, one drinks to relax, etc. And those things carried out in heavy amounts have major destructive patterns, even though they may be immediately beneficial. The other broad category has to do with the effect of chronic major unrelieved stress on the workings of one's brain and central nervous system. In recent years, and this is relatively new, it's become clear that chronic major unrelieved stress can produce the release of pro-inflammatory chemicals in a person's body and also can suppress immune system function. Of the 10 categories that we studied, any 6 of them produces a shortening in life expectancy of almost 20 years. The magnitude of this problem is so huge, and the complexity of dealing with it after the fact is so huge, that realistically the only serious approach is going to have to involve primary prevention. No one knows how to do that, but it's the right question to focus on.
Trying to start over, there we go. So I'm gonna contradict him a little bit. The last thing that he said, nobody knows how to do that. This is an older video. This was done before TBRI. We're learning so much about what we can do to help with that. The one thing that I want to point out, he talked about how 1 in 11 adults in this research was done with middle class, I believe it was something like 80% white individuals out in the West Coast area of the United States. And in that, almost all middle class white with insurance. Of those individuals, 1 in 11 had an ACE score of 6. I spent the last 7 years working in correctional facilities, and specifically the women that I worked with. I would do these every class that I would teach, and in my class in the correctional facilities, women specifically, we were between 50 and 80% of the women had an ACE score of 8. Now, why am I sharing this with you? What I'm realizing the longer I'm in this is the population of moms that are needing support are very similar to the population of women that I found that I worked with when I was in a correctional facility. That doesn't mean that all of the women that we're going to have you, we're going to ask you to watch their children have been incarcerated. That's not what that means, but they have very similar experiences. So these things also impact their perspective. As they come in, they're seeing the world from a very different place. They're seeing it as almost completely unsafe. If they've had an ACE score of 6, their life has been unsafe. There's not been people that have been kind and healthy and supportive and nurturing. Their perspective will look very different than a perspective of a family who understands Christ's love and his care for us. It's going to impact the way that they communicate and the way that they interact with us. I'll hand it back over to Libby.
Yeah, so with that, obviously experiences are things that can shift our perspective. So I want us to think about, and I don't know, I have this picture up because this is a picture that I took when I was in India, but how many of you have ever done like a mission trip or gone overseas, somewhere, a different state, somewhere outside of your perception where you saw like deep poverty? Anybody else? Okay, so for everybody who has, I'm guessing, because it's pretty hard to not come back like that, right? When we see children who are malnourished, when we see a huge lack in health conditions, a lack of opportunity for them to be able to have a better life, we come back with emotions, right? We come back, we might be angry about it, we might be frustrated, we might feel helpless, but we see that and it evokes a feeling or experience in us, right? And a lot of times, at least for me, right, I've been this person, we come back and we are ready to change the world, right? Like we're on this high and we're like, we're going to do all of these things. And yet I'm too uncomfortable to go to the other side of the tracks where poverty is sitting in my own backyard and needs just as much attention here as it does there, right? And we have the opportunity, because we're not living in poverty, that we can just check out. That's not my daily reality, right? So I have the ability that I can just walk away from that reality. I don't have to live in it. I don't have to sit in it. But these kids and these families, they don't have that option. This is their reality. And so what does it look like for us to help shift that perspective of what maybe their experiences are, so that we're seeing and understanding where that's coming from? So an example of this would be when I was in India, I worked at a lot of different agencies, like nonprofits that were already there doing great things. And so just bouncing from one to another, I lived there for a while. This wasn't like just a short-term thing. And they watch you if you go to the same place every single day. So I had to vary my activities. But one of the things that I did daily was in the mornings, I went to a place that was like a shelter for women and children, which obviously they go through a lot of clothes when we're a shelter for women and children that don't have a place to be. And so one of my jobs every single day was to wash the clothes. And I wasn't the only volunteer. There was lots of volunteers whose job was to wash the clothes, right? So it was a process. I mean, and it took hours. So first you had to boil water in this giant, I mean, gallons and gallons of water were in this giant metal tub, and you lit a fire underneath it, you boiled the water, and you poured all of the clothes into the boiling water, and you had this big stick and you like stirred it, right? You got blisters because the boiling water is popping up at you. And then you have to fish the clothes out of the boiling water, and you pass them down this super long line of sinks and counters, just concrete slabs, right? Where your job is like you get handed piece by piece, and you are scrubbing by hand the pieces of clothes together, and then on the rocks, and you scrub them together. And there's a process where you do it 3 times, and then you have to dunk it and wring it out and scrub it again, and then you pass it down the line. And this happens probably 5 times before you get to the end of the sink line, right? So 5 different sinks, 5 different counters where you're wringing them out. Finally, they get loaded up in a basket, where they take them to this tub of cold water, and you dump them all in the cold water, and you mix them with your hands, and you step on them. It's intuitive, right? Because you're like, these are clean clothes, and there's people that are like walking on them with their dirty feet in India, right? Doesn't make any sense, but it's what you do. And then after you do this, you wring all the clothes out. I mean, and you have to wring them out, right? So there's no water left, and you load them in a basket again, and you carry them up 5 flights of stairs to the roof of the building, where you hang the clothes up on clotheslines. Now, prior to me going to India, I used to hate doing laundry, right? Like one of my least favorite household chores. I would complain about how much time it took, how much energy, right? I'm the person who like get the laundry done and it sits in the basket for forever, or it's sitting dirty down by the washing machine for forever, right? Like it is my least favorite job. Give me any of the other household chores, just don't make me do laundry, right? And after that, I mean, this takes 3 hours every single day, and you do it by hand. My hands are covered in blisters. And so I made a vow in that moment, because my perception had shifted, that I would never again complain about doing laundry, right? Because I throw it in a machine, and the machine does it for me. I mean, again, I might have to fold the clothes at the end, but like, I'm not going up 3 flights of stairs to hang it up, to let them dry, to then take them down. And so that's something where my experience, right, drastically has shifted how I view that task that I do in day-to-day life. And there's still moments, right? I mean, I have stuck true to that vow. There are moments when I get a little like, ooh, I have to do laundry. Ooh, I have to fold that and put it away. And then I'm like, nope, I said I would never complain about laundry ever again. So our perspective on things based on our experiences, that can shift. That doesn't mean that wherever your perspective is at right now has to stay the same. So I want us to acknowledge poverty is complex, it's overwhelming, and like we said before, those of us not having to personally deal with those lived realities, we have the option of checking out. So when that's not a reality for someone, then we have an instance like this story. So, and also I'm going to preface, don't mind the words on the bottom of like who published this. This is just about a single mom who is trying to make ends meet for her son, and giving you a little glimpse into what's her perspective right now from where she's at.
My name is Sophia Cotton. I'm 22. I have a 1-year-old son. I'm a single mom. I make $7.50 an hour at McDonald's. Nothing. I make $230 to $240 every 2 weeks. I've been working there for almost a year. I haven't had a raise since I started working there. They have a slow week, you go home every day. I came into work one morning, I had to be there at 7. And once the general manager came in, she came in like 7:30, 8 o'clock, and she was like, oh, okay, well, Sophia, you can clock out. And I'm like, well, I just got here. She's like, oh, well, we don't need you, labor's high. You can go ahead and clock out. It's not really matter to them if we making our hours and getting paid. I got $261 in food stamps last month. Then they deducted it to $216. To go through the whole month for $216 is feeding my son, me, every day, like feeding breakfast, lunch, dinner. So I'll buy like frozen foods that I can keep in the refrigerator, on the freezer. I don't buy fresh fruits and stuff like that because it's not guaranteed that it'll be eaten all. Make it stretch. Come on. With childcare, I get CCIS, which is like covers your childcare or any daycare that you would like your child to go to. I do pay a copayment for $10 a week. His dad's actually incarcerated, so it's like just me. Come on, Safi. I want my son to not have to struggle the way I struggle. He's going to have a good paying job. He's not going to have to pick through anything. He's like, I'm going to do anything he want to do, he'll be able to do. Give me a cup. I'm going to make it easier for him so he won't have to see a struggle at all, because I'll rather struggle for him than him struggle for me. Like, it's going, I just want him to know. I'll make it easier for him. Yeah. My number one always is to make sure that my rent is paid, so I make sure that we have somewhere to live. Me and my sister split it. We paid $220 a piece. $1,030 pays $125 of it for us. One of my checks was $238, and it was like the week that rent was due. So it was like I paid the rent. I had no other choice. But then I found myself borrowing and borrowing. So when my next check come, that's my check that I use like to get diapers, my son some clothes. Like that's the check that I use to get those things. So it's like I find myself breaking into that because I have to pay everybody back. I only go to the doctor like if I need to go or I have no other choice to go, I'll go. I needed a root canal for one of my back teeth, and it was like, well, you know, if you get a root canal, it's, I think they told me it was like around $300 something, but they needed like a down payment. Like I couldn't, either I had to pay the whole thing or put down like half down payment. So I'm just like, okay, well, how much would it be like to pull a tooth or whatever? And they like, oh, well, it's free to pull a tooth, but we'd rather not pull a tooth because it's savable. And then I'm like, well, I'd rather you pull it because it's like I can't pay for it, but it's bothering me and I don't want the pain, so I'd rather you just pull a tooth. It's not really what you want to do, but it's what you have to settle for because you can't afford to get the right dental care. If I wasn't getting like rent, assistance, food stamps, or childcare help, I think I would still be like living in a shelter or something, because I wouldn't be able to pay rent and take care of my son and, you know, make sure he clothed and fed off of the checks that I received from McDonald's.
Bye-bye.
Come on, eat. It bothers me that I have to rely on government help, and I know that they making billions and billions of dollars. Like, it's like, why should I have to rely on them when I'm working for you? I should be able to rely on you to pay me for doing the things that you want me to do for you. And I believe that sooner or later it'll change, and I won't be struggling, and I won't have to, you know, pick from eating and buying my son something. Like, I'll be able to do both.
Okay, so before we go into this circle and explaining the circle of poverty, does anybody have anything that they noticed from the video about that mom, or maybe have any perspectives that you took away that possibly were shifting from something that you believed before?
Something that I was wondering is, like, how often do all of, for families, how often do all of those government subsidies, like how often do families dip in all the pots? It's just something I was thinking about, because I work with families who, like, I know some of my families get food stamps, some of my families are on child care assistance, but I was just, you don't have to have an answer, but something I was wondering was, is it more common for families to dip in one pot, or is it more common for families to dip in multiple of those resources?
I can answer that.
Yeah, you can.
Because when I left my ex-husband, I was on food stamps. I was on Medicaid. I was on Section 8 housing. I received twice a year, I received energy assistance. And then there was some occasional other things. The only thing that I did not get was Title 20, which was the child care subsidy. And the only reason I didn't get that was because I was working part-time and I got to schedule my hours. So I was always home when my kids were out of school. And so I did not need that one. So it is most common, if they are getting one, they are getting all of them. The one thing that is noteworthy is the way that you wean off of them once you find the ability. Title 20, the child care subsidy, is especially you make a certain amount of money and they drop it a little bit, and you make a little bit more money and they drop it a little bit farther, and you make a little bit more money and the bottom falls out. I remember working with a dad one year who called me one day and he said, I got a raise. And I said, well, tell me about that. And he said, I'm making another $1 an hour more. They gave me a raise of $1 an hour. Wow, they must really appreciate you. You know, I said, but you don't sound very happy about it. He said, I'm going to make $40 an hour, or $40 a week more, $160 a month more. And because he was a single dad with 5 kids, he was going to lose $1,200 a month in child care subsidy. He got a $1 raise and lost. My math, I'm not going to try and do the math that quickly. He decided to not accept the raise because he couldn't afford to accept a raise. Does that answer your question, Alyssa?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Ronnie.
And I'm going to step in because I have families come to me working in the pediatrician's office that my doctors will task me, you have a family that has food insecurity. Can you help them? or they have housing insecurity. So I'll start talking to them and I say, what do you have in place? Well, not anything. And so we start talking income and I say, you're not making it. So start applying for food stamps and Medicaid and housing and childcare. Because it's one application, you just check different boxes, and the application incomes are a little bit different, but apply for it all because you're not surviving the way it is. Try for anything you can get a hold of. And by the way, here is Food Bank, and here is Food Net, and here is Lincoln Fresh, and here's where the free meals around town are. So I encourage families that are struggling, apply for anything and all, because that's what it's there for. When you're struggling, you need it. And hopefully they can find a way to get off of it before that $1,200 drops out from underneath them, like Ronnie was saying with that husband or that father.
So
It's
from that,
disheartening.
yeah. So from that, we're gonna go into talking about how people get stuck, right? Like, I mean, that bottom falls out, right? And sometimes it's hard to get out because they don't have people around them to help and to lean on and those connections. And so a lot of times it starts with, right? We have parents who often are in this situation and the kids are experiencing the same thing because there's a pretty good chance that this is generational, that these parents experienced poverty as a child. So it starts with, we have hunger and poor health and poor living conditions, right? Which, I mean, the hunger part, she's making her money stretch from that video, right? To try to make those food stamps last. But she's using frozen foods because you can't use fresh foods. Those are going to go bad. She has poor health. She's just having them pull her tooth instead of save it because she doesn't have the money to be able to pay for them to save her tooth, right? And our living conditions, I mean, she was lucky because it sounded like she had a sister who was going in on rent with her. But not everybody has that. You know, I have seen some pretty awful living conditions because it's a roof over their head as opposed to living in a shelter. So if you were a child who had any of those things going on, just one of those things, and you're sitting in a classroom, is there any way that when you're hungry, like at work, if you're hungry at work, is there any way you're getting any work done? Like if you're in a training, are you hearing or learning really anything that they're saying? No, I'm thinking about how I'm so hungry or I'm so thirsty, right? If I am feeling really sick because I had to go to school sick because mom can't take another day off of work, and I'm sitting there with a fever, I'm not learning from the teacher, right? My brain, it's like that TBRI part, like my brain isn't making it to the frontal cortex. I'm stuck back in my brain stem. So then when we're not taking in all of the information at school and we're not learning, then we probably, our odds of getting into a college or believing that we can even go to a college, that's pretty minimal. And so then we're stuck with, what are our jobs that are available that I can get without a college degree? And in this case for her, right, that was McDonald's. And so if McDonald's is the highest level of a job, right, you might be able to make your way up to manager, but you're probably never going to own a McDonald's from that point, right? So you had that lack of opportunity. And because you had a lack of opportunity, it led you to having a low income job. And because you have a low income job, you're probably not going to be able to afford the food that you need for your family, take care of your health needs, or deal with your living conditions. So the cycle just keeps going round and round and round until we have people who aren't in the cycle who are trying to step in and break us out of these things. Ronnie, did you have anything you wanted to add on this one?
I think you did well. I think you're good.
So from that aspect, right, a lot of times our physical needs, that baseline is the part it's not being met. And so this is I mean, he's done a lot of research, and some people don't love his hierarchy of needs, but if you look at it from this perspective on this diagram, we can't, regardless of if we know, right, if we're not in crisis and we have our physiological needs met and we're feeling safe and are loving and belonging, right, we have all of those things, and we can look in on somebody in crisis and we can say, gosh, if they just learned how to budget their money better, right? I mean, because it makes sense, right? And realistically, you know, like, there might be some issues with budgeting that they have. But if I try to teach someone budgeting without making sure they have food or water or a roof over their head or are feeling safe, are they going to be able to hear and listen and learn any of that? Yeah, they're not. So the idea within the Families Together program, right, is we're trying to meet those needs in the order that they need met. So we're helping and in the home, in a host home capacity, right? Like, if you're taking kids into your home, you are making sure those physical needs are met. They're getting good sleep at your house, which might be something that they've never done before. So that might be a learning curve, right? For them to learn, like, how to go to bed appropriately, because they're used to just staying up really late because we're in chaos and we don't know how to calm our bodies down. They might not be used to wearing certain clothes. One time I had a little girl who cried because there wasn't a hole in her sock. And she was so used to having a hole in her sock. She didn't have any socks that didn't have holes in them, right? That felt weird to have those needs met. But once they realize that stability, moms included, right? We're also working on meeting, or dads, meeting parents' needs at the same time as kids are being taken care of, right? So how can we help stabilize their house that they're coming from while everybody is in a safe place? And then once you get past meeting those physical needs, then we go to safety needs. So the kids obviously are safe when they're in your homes, but what does it look like if they don't have felt safety, right? So even if that goes back to that TBRI, even if they're actually safe or parents are actually safe, if we haven't addressed that felt safety because of past trauma and their ACE scores, we still might not be able to get to the next level of the pyramid until, again, we look at that first. And Ronnie, obviously, as an advocate, and Susan, you as well, you would be the ones who would be working through these levels with parents, right? Making sure that we're getting them at the points that they're willing and wanting to hear these things and able to learn them. Obviously, we've talked a lot about how relationship and connection is really the thing that is going to, I mean, that's what's going to help them flourish. That's what's going to help them break this cycle. But they can't even get to that connection, right? Until we have the safety and physiological needs met. And so sometimes when we're in the midst of this is the part where it feels like, oh, we're doing a lot of things for them, or we're enabling them, right? But that's not actually the case. We're just making sure that we can get their brain to a point where they can even possibly get themselves out of the situation that they're in at no fault of their own, probably, because it's probably a cycle that they got stuck in. Ronnie, did you have anything else you wanted to add to this one?
Nope, you're doing great.
Does anybody have any?
Go, Libby.
Does anybody have any questions on this? For me, right, like I heard this all the time in my classes in college and in grad school. but this, I'm guessing, is probably a semi-new concept to some of you. So does anybody have questions on the cycle of poverty or on the hierarchy of needs? Okay, so now we're going to touch on some things that, right, we're shifting our perspectives. And so what does it look like when we're seeing a certain choice or we're seeing a certain lifestyle? What's maybe actually going on behind that of why this choice is being made? So we're going to start with smoking. So you might see a parent or parents who are heavy smokers, and likely due to the fact that there's a higher number of tobacco retailers in impoverished areas. The communities get more exposure. And so because you're seeing more ads, you're seeing more of those shops around your neighborhood, it becomes normalized. So then if everybody in your neighborhood is smoking, it provides a time for socialization, and you're craving connection, right? So you'll do anything for it. And then on top of that, it makes you feel good. Your life is chaotic and crazy and not super fun. And this is something that makes it feel better. In the same way, we have electronics. So a lot of times what you'll see is kids who are coming from poverty households or parents, they spend a lot of time on electronics. And sometimes in their house, they have high-end electronics, which doesn't make sense, right? Because we just watched a video and you're like, wait, how do you have money to buy a TV that's really expensive, but you don't have money to pay your rent, or you don't have money to buy food for your house? But they're making those choices because they're valuing entertainment. That is going to be purchased over food because it's providing a break from reality. And so all of our kids and our parents, and I can't remember if they talked about this in our brief TBRI video or not, right? Like, they are survivors. They're really good at making choices that try to keep them alive. And so when our bodies are living in chaos and stress, right? Like, they're seeking that reprieve because their body is telling them they can't do it anymore. They can't, their lymph system is activated, and they can't just keep running a marathon all day long. And so they're seeking that break. So a lot of times that's their driving force. And again, if you have a kid in your home that all they want to do is be on electronics, that's hard to break sometimes. If your household is like, no, we have like a 1 hour a day technology rule or less, could be more, but something that maybe a compromise is needed on as we're gradually learning what it looks like, because that's a normal for them. And it makes them feel good. So then also what makes us feel good would be substance abuse. And we kind of touched on this with the ACE scores, but addiction can often result in poverty. So if somebody is predisposed to addiction, right, there's a good chance they'll end up in poverty because their addiction will take a large amount of their money, or they'll lose their job. But sometimes it is an instance where they're seeking that substance out because, again, it's providing that escape. It's normalized in their community, and they're seeking that connection. Sometimes we have instances with mental health where they don't have access to or don't have the time to take off work to go get their mental health needs met. And so they have easy availability to get something else that's gonna relieve their anxiety in the same way that an appropriate anxiety medicine would. So sometimes they use it to self-medicate. And again, I would say substance abuse is are very tied to our ACEs in the realm of there's lower levels of education, they have their trauma histories, race can impact that, their mental health histories, and income. So that one's a little bit more complex. In the realm of mental health and poverty are linked. That doesn't mean that somebody who has a mental health struggle is living in poverty, and vice versa. It doesn't mean that somebody who is living in poverty necessarily has any mental health diagnoses, but a lot of times they have a lot more, because trauma experiences often, I mean, they talked about in that ACE that it heightens our response, right? So it causes stress, it lowers our ability for our bodies to react how they should. And so it's changing chemicals in our brain. And a lot of times, right, those mental health instances are because our brains aren't working just quite as they're supposed to. It's not making enough of this chemical to keep this hormone balanced. And so they usually also, when they're in those moments, like we said, they're not getting connected to the services that they need to be able to treat the issue. So this could also be, I mean, like PTSD, right? Like it could be you have somebody who has a one-time traumatic experience that happens to them. But again, if it doesn't get addressed, they're not getting the therapy or the counseling or the help that they need. That's going to continue to build and get bigger and bigger as they age. And then domestic violence. So living in poverty creates opportunities where stress levels obviously rise. I don't know about you guys, but if I'm stressed, right, I'm in that brainstem, so I'm not thinking clearly. And sometimes they make choices in that stress that I don't really mean to make, right? I don't want to make those, but I'm not thinking clearly. So if poverty is creating higher levels of stress, the possibility of them reacting in those higher level of stress in a way that comes out physically is higher. And so sometimes that causes more frequent domestic violence instances, or survivors leave their abuser and then enter environments where oftentimes it's homelessness because they got out with just the clothes on their back. I do want to preface in the realm of domestic violence that particularly at this point in time for the Families Together program, when we do an intake and we're asking families questions, we don't take in any families who are in a current domestic violence situation. We do that for the safety of you and your family. So if there's a current domestic violence situation that's happening, we direct them to the appropriate shelters in town who can handle those things well and keep everybody safe. But we want to keep you and your families safe as well. That's a high priority that we have. And so that's a line that we have drawn in the sand at this moment. That also doesn't mean that there could be something that is happening that we don't know about. I mean, again, we usually ask pretty good questions, right? Everybody has to sign things appropriately. But it's possible that there could be an instance where you're hearing somebody who maybe isn't in a current domestic violence situation, but definitely has some domestic violence history as a parent is talking to you about something, or a kid maybe makes a comment and it makes you question. So I would say if you're ever in those instances, just ask more questions to try to get a little bit more context to what's going on. And then if it's definitely a dangerous situation, we want to protect you and we want to protect that family. So then you would just call us or directly call 911 if you ever knew of something like that. But again, our line is in the sand right now on that. And we haven't had any drastic issues where we're like, oh gosh, we really missed the mark in any capacity. So wanted you to be prepared for that, but also know that hopefully you won't have to deal with that directly. Ronnie, did you have anything else on that?
Yeah, I want to make a quick comment on that. A lot of times, victims of domestic violence were raised in a domestic violence environment, and it's very normalized. And so I can ask in an intake, or as I'm interacting and getting to know the mom, I can say, you know, are you safe? Are you experiencing any domestic violence? Has your partner ever hurt you? And what they hear is, I've never been strangled, or nobody's ever tried to drown me or hit me with a car on purpose. Because to them, that's what domestic violence is. To them, domestic violence is not cutting me down emotionally nonstop. Domestic violence isn't necessarily trying to control me. That's the way all normal families are from their perspective. And so as I interview and as I ask questions, I'm going to ask the questions. I'm going to try to screen. But if they don't believe that they are victims of domestic violence, because this is the way dad treated mom, the way grandpa treated grandma on both sides of the family, the way all of my uncles treated my aunts, that might be something that gets missed. If you ever have concerns, Libby and I are here, and that goes with anything. Libby's going to be a great support. I'm also available to support you as well, if you have questions on what's going on in a home.
Perfect. Thanks, Ronnie. Okay, so next we're going to talk about removing barriers. So obviously, when we're stuck in that poverty cycle, there's barriers that come up that prevent, or the instance where you got a $1 raise, right? And now you can't make ends meet anymore and you have to reevaluate everything. So Ronnie's going to share with you a brief story of someone that she has worked with and knows where when those barriers can become mountains, that they're paralyzing.
My first experience with Families Together was about 2 years ago, when a mom that was in one of my classes in jail came to me and said, hey, I'm pregnant. I don't think I'm going to make it out of jail before the baby's born. And as it turned out, the judge said, nope, not going to let you out of jail until the baby's born. I don't want your baby born with meth, and I don't trust you to not relapse when you get out. So baby was born. We placed baby in a host home, and mom got out of jail 1 week later. Mom, I missed a phone call earlier during our training. It was from that mom. Actually, I'm still in contact with her consistently. And she got out of jail. She started working on herself. She went through treatment, and she went through IOP, which stands, these are letters you may hear off and on. She went through IOP, which is intensive outpatient treatment. Then she went through OP, which is outpatient treatment. Then she went through aftercare. Then she did some counseling. Then, all of the hoops that they were requiring her to jump through, she was jumping through. And then it was time for her to get a job. And in this whole time, she is slowly getting her, by her choice, slowly taking her child back. She knew that the baby would bond to the host home, and she didn't want to mess him up. So when it was time for him to go home, we slowly moved him home at her request. So she's getting her baby back. She's got him now in childcare. She's still in contact with the host home, and she starts applying for jobs. And she goes to somebody suggested that she go to a temp agency. She went into the temp agency. We had worked together, and she had built what we call a turnaround letter. The turnaround letter says, I'm a felon. These are my felonies. I understand the impact that my felonies had on society, on my family, on whoever might have been hurt by that. I take ownership of that. I am working to make a better life. These are the things that I've done to change my life. And the temp agency matched her with a job. And she started working. And she called me, and man, it's hard work, but I'm learning. It was a factory job. I've learned this line, and I'm doing really good on it. And my supervisor praised me today. And then, hey, because I was doing so good on this line, they decided maybe they'd put me on this line and see how I could do. And I did okay on that line. And so now I'm more valuable. They're telling me I'm more valuable because I can do 2 jobs. And then one day she called me and she said, guess what? There's an opening for a line supervisor. and they're gonna give it to me. They just have to finish the paperwork up. I'm not gonna be working through the temp agency anymore. The company is gonna hire me on directly, which means I get insurance. I'm gonna get a good pay raise, and I'm gonna get PTO, which is things she had not had working for the temp agency. And I'm going to be a supervisor 6 months, probably less than 6 months before this, she'd been in jail. She had worked so hard and her work ethic was amazing. They call her, they say, okay, come in on Tuesday. We're going to fill out the paperwork because we have extra paperwork that has to be filled out to take you off of the temp agency and to hire you on directly. So she's sitting in front of her new boss and they're filling out the paperwork and he's going through the questions and she's saying, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And then he said, are you a felon? And he marked the no button. And she said, yes. And he looked at her and he said, are you serious? She said, yes, I'm a felon. Did you inform the temp agency of this? And she said, they got a whole letter from me explaining it. They know that I'm a felon. Well, here's the thing. We don't hire felons. We do not allow felons to work at our factory. I'm gonna have to talk to some people about this. And they called her 2 days later and relieved her of her job. She had done everything right. She had worked hard. She was working hard to change her life. And everything on the job that she had done was excellence. But because there was a piece of something in her past, it wiped clean everything that she had worked for over those last 6 months. And she lost the job that she was expecting to become a supervisor in. It's not all horrible. It took her a while, but she found another job. She's now got a very good job that is a solid job, works very good, works with her. She's a single mom of a little guy. There's lots of medical appointments and there's lots of other appointments. And this job is definitely, I mean, she's come to know Christ, by the way, through Families Together and through this experience. And she looks at her job now and she says, this is where God wants me. Yes, God made it work out, but this is what our families work with. They get a raise that they have to decline. They get a promotion and then find out that no, they can't have it because there's a drug addiction or there's a whatever. If they don't have people that are willing to go to bat for them. Her current supervisor at her current job, she again shared everything. And by the way, she was terrified to share that she was a felon when she applied for this job. And in the interview, she told him her story. He closed the door and he said, I just want you to know, I've been clean and sober for about 2 years now. I understand where you're coming from. But I don't tell people around here about it. But he was willing to go to bat for her because our families often need people that have power, that have the ability to go to bat for them and encourage them. Libby, what else do I need to share? Anything else?
That was perfect. Yeah, so on that, we're going to touch on, and this is not a comprehensive list. We just picked a few small areas of where just the system itself is set up in a way that is creating barriers for these families, right? So we talked about healthcare. So not only do they maybe not have the money to get their teeth pulled, right? They can't go to the doctor because the doctor has limited weekend or evening hours and they're working during the day and they're working at a job that either doesn't allow them to take time off or they've had to use all of their time off to take care of their kids. And if they take one more day off, they're going to lose their job. or they don't get PTO at all, and it's just a day that's unpaid, and they can't go a day where they don't make money. And then also they're going to have to pay money to get the medical care that they need. So then you would say, well, we have those free healthcare places, right, that they can go to, which is true. They still have to take a day off of work. And I don't know if you've ever been to one of those or tried to get served at any of those clinics, even the after hour ones, right? Like, great intent. And if we're really desperate, we're going to go to those. But we're not going to go to those until like we're on our deathbed, right? I mean, we're making those choices, not actually addressing our health when we need to be addressing it, because those have really long wait periods and hours. And if you're not there in the line 3 hours before it opens, they're not going to see you that day. And then you're going to have to do it all over again the next week or the next month, because some of them only happen once a month. So just the system itself of healthcare, right, is already, again, we're doing some of the things as a society to try to eliminate those barriers, but that's still barriers that they're facing. In the realm of schools, and schools, keep in mind, schools are trying really hard in their specific schools, right, to be able to meet the needs of their kids in their classroom. We have caseworkers at school. We have teachers who really love and care about their kids, so they're fighting hard for the kids. But sometimes the system is creating barriers for the families. So sometimes there's forms that parents either, have to sign electronically or would have to pick up in person. And parents don't get the forms home from the kids because they're not home to supervise. Or in instances like with computers, right? We're now in a computer age. And so when kids are getting laptops, a lot of times we're having to sign things that says if something bad happens to the laptop, we're going to pay X, Y, and Z fees to cover the cost of the laptop. When you're sending a child home to a home where there's not a lot of supervision, and parents are having to sign that, there's a higher likelihood with lack of supervision that computer is going to get broken, right? And then we have families who are in poverty who they can't cover the cost of that computer being broken. And so that's something where they're like, well, I don't really want to sign this, but I have to because my kid needs a computer to be able to do their work. Granted, again, keep in mind, this is generally speaking because schools love kids and try to meet them where they're at, but still barriers. And so if we have that situation, then parents are in the spot of, well, I got to make sure I have internet, right? I have to have internet in my home for my kid to use their computer to be able to do their homework. But maybe we don't have access to there are some agencies in town like internet companies, right, that try to give lower cost internet to families or access to those, but they're not in all of the areas. I don't know about you guys, but like I can get 2 different internet companies where I'm at, just 2, right? So it's a pick your poison, and the cost differential is like maybe $5, and it still costs a whole lot of money. So internet's not cheap, and not all of them have it because a lot of times they're like, well, we'll just get data on our phone. And maybe we won't pay for unlimited, but we'll just get some so we can get some of our internet needs met, but not all of them. So then we have to figure out how to get a kid to a place that has free internet, but our car doesn't work. So then we have to figure out how we're going to get them on transportation with their computer, which is likely going to get broken in the process, right? To be able to just get our homework done. So these are a lot of barriers where it seems like, oh yeah, this kid only has, a 30-minute assignment after school that they need to get done. Parent isn't home to help them when they have questions. And then parents, they're not able to talk to the teachers. Teachers are trying to communicate the things that they need to communicate to the parents. And parents are working hours that aren't ideal. And so unless there's parent meetings that are not scheduled during their work hours, right? Some of these parents are working 2 to 3 jobs. So it doesn't matter how hard the teachers try to be accommodating, the meetings can only ever be in the middle of their job timeframes. Then we get into higher education. So if these kids even make it to thinking that they're like, oh yeah, I can do this. I can go to college. I'm going to be the first one in my family that goes to college. The first thing you have to do is like complete the financial aid forms. I don't know about any of you, but those are long and really confusing, especially if you're a high schooler and you have no idea what you're doing. And so who do you ask for help on that? You ask your parents. And if your parents haven't gone to college, they have no idea how to help you with those forms because they're like, I don't know, good luck. And so then maybe they get all those forms figured out. They get in to college, they filled out the right things. But at higher education, we have colleges where their offices operate in silos. So if the kid got a scholarship for something and one office didn't communicate to another office about it, right? They don't know how to navigate the system of higher education and the offices that they need to go to talk to this person and then this person and then this person, because nobody in their family is familiar with any of those offices or higher education at all. And so then if you're in that moment of higher education, you're like, this is really hard. And everybody else is like, yeah, I don't know how to help you. You're going to be pretty quick to be like, yep, I'm out. I'm just going to give up, right? Because nobody knows how to help me in my struggle. So then we end up with, we have a lot of families who are, they're trying to reach out to social services. Susan's sending them to all the right places, right? She's trying to send them to everything that they can get connected to. And we have great social services set up who desire to help people, but we still have barriers even in that. We have a whole bunch of documentation and forms you got to fill out to be able to get served. And then we use forms that have legalese or uncommon vocabulary in it. And they maybe never even made it through high school. And so we're using words on here that they don't understand. So they can't complete the form. And so then they just give up. Or they have to go to the place in person to get the form. And they don't have transportation. And so it's just easier to not go. Or maybe you have somebody who's seeking out all of the help. They listen to Susan and they're doing all the things and they're working with as many agencies as they can. And Christmas comes around. And all of their agencies are loving their go-getter attitude. And they've had 2 different agencies that have asked them, hey, do you want help with Christmas gifts this year? And obviously they're like, yeah, that'd be great. That's such a blessing, right? But actually in Lincoln, and I don't know about Omaha particularly, but in Lincoln, there's like a system where you're only allowed to ask for Christmas gifts through one program. You can't double dip. And if you try to double dip, and it looks like you tried to double dip, then everybody's like, ooh, you're being super dishonest. You probably won't get help with Christmas gifts from anybody. But they weren't trying to be dishonest, right? They're like, Ronnie, like we're trying to communicate. We just didn't know. We didn't know that was a rule. So even in the midst of us trying to be helpful, right? Like we can have barriers that are created. And then faith communities. Again, we want to love on people because God has called us to love on people. But sometimes we don't realize that we're creating additional barriers for these families. So an instance of this would be sometimes we require participation in programs for families to receive help. If we have a family who is Muslim, right, who they really need help, and that would be a great avenue for us to be able to minister to them and reach them and meet them where they're at. But our requirement is that their kids have to go to this group where there's a Bible study every week. They're not going to send their kids to the Bible study, and then they're not going to get the help that they actually need. And the parent probably isn't going to hear the gospel. And then sometimes we have, and again, I feel like in general in Nebraska, this one isn't quite as common because I think we really try to communicate to each other as social services and faith communities, and we really try to work together. But sometimes community services like food pantries operate in silos from other churches or other community resources. So sometimes we just don't know who all is doing what. And we're all trying to create our own little individual things, which again is great because we want to help people, right? But if there's a whole lot of little things, they might have to go to 3 different pantries to be able to get the foods that they need, because none of the food pantries are as well stocked to get all of the items that they need. Ronnie, do you have any more? I mean, again, these are very quick, brief, definitely not comprehensive of all of the barriers that our families experience. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add? Okay, so last in the realm of poverty is, what does it look like to do with? I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the book called When Helping Hurts, right? But we as Christians don't want to be doing something that's actually going to hurt these people who are in poverty. And a lot of the times what that looks like is we want to do something with them. We don't want to necessarily do it for them. We love them, we care about them, right? But in the same way that as a parent, I'm sure that while you would love to do all of the things for your kids, if you pick up the toys every single day, they're never going to know how to pick up the toys themselves, right? But you could pick up the toys with them to help them learn, hey, this is the basket where this goes. And so the idea here is, what does it look like to do this with families so that they feel that their dignity is honored in the midst of their crisis? So we have just a couple strategies that we feel like are pretty helpful when you're trying to figure out, how do we work with people in poverty? So the first one is seek first to understand. And I would say a lot of times, this one will be one of your harder ones that you're going to be dealing with parents, because they might react really quickly or seem like they're reacting to something that you're saying. And really, you just need to ask some clarifying questions of them to understand, because there's a possibility they might not understand where you're coming from too, right? We've got different perspectives. So how do we seek to understand? Then model the behavior that you'd like to see. So if you have a hosting in your household and you're communicating with mom or dad, and mom or dad is having a really hard time respecting your boundaries, or having a really hard time being kind in the language that they're using when they talk to you, right? How do we model respect? Like, I'm going to respect their boundaries and I'm going to be kind in my communication with them, because I want them to see that. I mean, that's where our brains are getting rewired again, right? You're modeling that behavior for parents and kids of what you're hoping that they'll see, and then they'll follow your lead. This one's a little bit more specific to Susan and Ronnie in the realm of their roles within the Families Together program. Your guys' roles would look more along the lines of, like, you're loving on the kids and supporting the kids during the hosting, because that's a job that is very much so not taken lightly. And we don't want you feeling like you have to be supporting both the kids and the parent. That's what family advocates are for, is to be that direct support to parents. But if you are able to, in a conversation, identify something that is motivating to that parent or that kid, right? Then we're going to connect them to resources that might be helpful. So if that's something where instead of you directly connecting, you're like, hey, I'm going to let Ronnie know this is something that this parent really, really loves, or they really care about. I don't know of resources in the area. Can you connect them, or can you follow up on that? Or Susan, right? Like, if you're in that role, what does that look like? With kids, if you already know the resources that they need that motivate them, by all means, try to connect mom and child to that resource so that that resource continues for the child after they go home. But if that's not something that you know specifically, reach out to myself or Ronnie, and we can help connect them to those resources. Break things down in small steps. So a lot of times, because they're in crisis, they're not going to be able to comprehend or conceptualize or plan really far in advance. And so even in your conversations with them, right, we take a breath and we just talk through just this little step first, and we make things more manageable, more doable. So let's say that you are trying to coordinate with a parent, what do they want family time to look like? So maybe you have a mom who is on bed rest, and so she's not in a place where she can't see her kids at all. It's just that she has her kids in a hosting because she can't get them to and from school, and she can't make their meals for them. And so she needs some help. So she's available, but in the realm of you scheduling the time frames for her, she's feeling really stressed. So you're thinking, oh, I'm going to schedule out the next 7 weeks while you're on bed rest. And she's thinking, actually, I'm only going to be able to think through next week. So how do you start small and help make sure that you guys still have what you need, right? You get the information that you need. We get plans and structures in place that are needed, but breaking that down into small manageable steps, or going big picture generally. Let's try this. And if this doesn't work and we need to revisit it, great. We don't have to have this be a permanent thing. We can adapt. And then another one is loyalty when that person isn't around. So how are you talking about or referring to these kids or these families when you're with somebody else, when you're with your coworkers, when you're with your family, when you're at church? How are you talking about them? Is your language empowering, or is your language demeaning? Right? Because however we're talking about them, we're going to start to internalize that's who they are. So what does our language look like? And then keeping our promises. So a lot of times we have people kids, parents who struggle with trusting, and they struggle with that trust piece because, again, it's that TBRI, their needs weren't met, or somebody said they were going to do something and they didn't follow through. And so they really struggle with that connection piece and trusting you and believing that what you're saying is true because of that, all of the instances where that was said, but not actually shown to them. And so by keeping your promises, right, making only promises that you can keep, you're helping rewire their brains to be able to trust and to be able to have those connections. And I know that you're like, gosh, what if I only had the kids for 1 week? What if I had them for 3 days? You're still helping build those new connections. It's so important. And then here's a few do's and don'ts. So do appreciate their humor or entertainment provided by the individual. So if they are trying to make a joke and it's crude and inappropriate and not actually that funny, right? You're still going to appreciate the fact that they are trying to connect with you. You know, you might not actually appreciate the humor that they just displayed, but appreciate that they are striving for connection with you. Don't do a put down or be sarcastic about the humor that they used. Do accept that the individual maybe can't say something about a person or a situation. So there could be instances where you have a person who's scared. There's a safety risk if it could be a trauma piece from a long time ago that they're like, no, I can't say that person's name or give all the full details. If there's an instance where you're like, oh, this is odd, ask questions, but do respect if they say, hey, that's not my story, or I can't go into that person's story, in the same way that we're respecting your stories, right? Respect that I'm not going to share your stories from your self-studies with anybody else. And so if they're saying, no, I can't tell you more than this, respect that that's the limit. And don't be insistent or demand that they give you full explanations of that person or a situation. Do respect the demands and priorities of relationships. Don't be insistent on middle class views of relationships. So sometimes, and honestly, this one's probably the hardest one, right? Because of our perception of things, sometimes we don't even realize that that's a middle class view, right? But these kids and these families, they are good at meeting their needs, right? So how they meet their needs might look different than how we meet our needs. That doesn't mean that how they're doing it is wrong. They're still meeting their needs, right? Because they're survivors. They know how to survive. So we need to make sure, again, that we're doing that dignity. We're meeting them where they're at. We're honoring that and respecting that their priorities might look a little bit different. Do use an adult voice. Ronnie describes this as a mentor voice, right? So like, you might be one step ahead of them, but they could be, your coworker in 2 years, right? So we're going to talk to them like I would talk to another adult. Don't use our parent voice, right? Our parent voice is somebody we're talking down. We're in some aspects, not intentionally, right? But saying like, oh, I know more than you, and you have to listen to me and do things that I want to do. And that's not doing with, right? Do help assist with goal setting. That doesn't mean that you're telling the individual his or her goals. So if they're coming to you, and again, this is down the road, right? More so probably Susan and Ronnie would be the ones who are navigating in the goal setting realm. But if you still have connection with this parent or parents after the kids go home, and you're a part of their lives, and they're coming to you and they're asking for advice, right? Ask them questions. Ask them, what do you want? Where do you want to be in 6 months? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Break it down into those small steps first to build up. And if they've never future planned, if they've never thought that they could have anything better, ask them questions about, what do they feel like is getting in the way right now? What are their barriers? Because usually from your barriers, you can tell what they're reaching for, right? What is it that they're striving for? And then help them be like, oh yeah, I want that. Because I'm not going to search after a goal. If Ronnie told me, oh, Libby, your goal is this, right? I'm probably not going to work very hard to meet that goal, because I don't care what Ronnie's goal is. I care what my goal is for me when I come to the realization of it. Do identify options related to available resources, and don't make judgments on the value or availability of those resources. So that one is one in the aspect of, they don't always have access to the things that you think that maybe they should have access to, right? They're survivors. They're making sure in whatever capacity that they know that their needs are getting met. And then do understand the importance of personal freedom and speech and individual personality, and don't assign disapproval of character traits to the individual. Again, this is just going back to, are we honoring their dignity? Okay, and then this is the last part about poverty. And then for our care community portion, it's more of I'm going to give you some brief tools that will go with your homework that you're already doing on your own. So that part will be quick. This one is a video that is called the Cost of Poverty Experience. It's, I mean, you can pay to go through the whole experience. They have a virtual one for free that's available once a month. It's like a 2-hour training in the middle of the day. I wanted to, if we would have been doing this in person, basically what I would have done is you all would have drawn a card. It would have been an experience, and you would either be somebody in the community who is helping, or you would be the person living in poverty. And so this is kind of to show you what are all the things that somebody in poverty is carrying, what's everything that they're trying to hold up right now. And then how can you come alongside with whatever gifts that you have, help try to eliminate those barriers and do with, right? We're just trying to be a part of their community to lessen that load that they're carrying so that they can focus on those kiddos that they have. Again, video.
Okay.
So sorry.
So you're the mom, all right? Got everything up. You got it? You can't drop it. You gotta hold it all up. This is your responsibility. All right? Okay. So you heard somebody talking about a budget. You thought, man, that would be helpful. You know, you never really hit a budget. You work, you go to school and you work at Wendy's and you do your best to pay all the bills. You're not going to believe this. You went to go get in the car. Got it? You sure? Yeah. Okay. You went to get in the car and daggone thing wouldn't start. You don't know what's wrong with it. You bought it with your income tax 2 years ago. You're going to have to ride the bus. Which means you got to take the kids to school on the bus, then you got to get to work, then you got class too, right? You're really struggling with an algebra course, but you got to take this algebra class in order to get your degree. One of the kids put something in the toilet. The boys,
probably
nothing. You can't figure it out. You called the landlord because there's a plumbing problem, right? The landlord said, it's your problem. You fix it. You got one toilet in the house. You good? Heavy?
Yes.
Yeah? Having trouble holding it all up?
It's about to be very complicated.
So, yeah, this is you. This is yours. So, you got, did you put a kid in there? That children's were not gonna like that. So, your food stamps just got reduced because you got more financial aid at school than what you thought. And you don't totally understand it all, but all you know is you paid all of your bills, and you just cannot figure out how to make ends meet and have enough food for your family, and you're sick of spaghetti. The boys are sick of spaghetti. You're trying to figure out what else you can cook. Okay, top it all off. You got a lot of laundry at the house, and you just feel like sitting in the hallway and crying. Because you don't have time to get the laundry done. You're feeling very overwhelmed. Things feel really heavy right now. So, Emily, can you come on up? Read your card.
Hey, one of our church elders owns a plumbing business. I'm sure I can give him a call and he will come by and look at your toilet.
You take the plunger. Nicolette, you want to read your card and come up for me? You can stand up there.
Hey, Serena. I don't know that garage because I know I can give them my guys.
Who else we got? Go for it, Karen.
My church is part of CareForward, that helps connect families with different needs they have. I can put a request out there to see if anyone has clothes that can help. Who else?
My agency works at the Martin Math department in the university. I can see if she can help with your algebra.
I'd love to come over and hang out and I'll take care of the clothes. You will have a coffee.
I help with my women's group at the church, and we have a 5-hour meal cookbook. I can get you a copy.
Our church is doing a financial fitness class. It may give you some information that can help with the budget. All right, you got those babies, Serena? Yeah, take a look at the people standing behind you.
Wow.
All right, go ahead. Hold everything up, okay?
Sorry.
So, you're the mom. All right, got everything up, you got it?
This is where we're having technical difficulties now. Okay, so from that, what did you guys see in her situation? We had a mom who had a whole lot on her shoulders. If she stayed isolated, what would life have looked like for her?
Very difficult, almost impossible. Just trying to juggle it all and navigate, and I don't see how she could even do it all, let alone do it well.
Absolutely. So the goal here, right, is that we're building those connections and using relationships to help in whatever way that we can, whatever way that we're gifted, whatever way God is calling you. That doesn't have to look the same for every family because you're all different with all different gifts. But everybody who was there, right, had something that they were able to contribute where it wasn't feeling demeaning for that mom, or how a lot of our parents feel, right, is they feel like they don't need people, right? Because they've separated themselves from people as a protection, right? So then they're not hurt. So all of these people stepped in and helped her to see that she was doing it with others. She had a whole group of people who supported her and loved on her and were on her team with her and her kids, right? Because when they did that, then that gave the opportunity for her to focus on what it looked like to just be a good mom and keep those babies safe.
Libby, something that I thought of, so as part of my job, I go into the homes of each of my students and I work with the families on goals that they have. And a comment that I hear a lot from the parents that I'm working with is, I feel like you're the only person supporting me, or I feel like you're co-parenting with me, or I don't have any friends. Like, I'm sorry, I just word vomited on you. I don't have anyone else to talk to. And so looking at that video, there were 6 or 7 people standing behind her, each taking a little piece. Like, we can be help, but we have to help in community, because if I'm the only person supporting you, I can't.
Absolutely.
So I appreciated that in that it wasn't one person or one organization coming in and fixing it all. It was acknowledging that it's going to take a lot of people.
Yes.
Helping.
And that's perfect. That leads us into our next thing, right? Like, this is hard work, being in the messy with people, and we can't feel like we have to shoulder it all alone. We need people alongside of this, doing this with us. And some of those people might be people who are directly supporting you and caring for you. in the midst of you trying to do hard things, right? And some of these people might just be people who are stepping up and trying to help also care for these families at the same time. So we're going to talk about, oh, maybe. There we go. We're going to talk about the importance of community briefly, and then finding your people or identifying your people. So a lot of times we probably already have the people who are our community and are our supports. We're just not thinking through strategically who those are. And we're going to make you think through that ahead of time, because when you're in crisis, it's really hard to think and process. So if you're just trying to survive in that moment because you're trying to live in crisis with these families, right? You need your people to help bring the calm to your household. Okay, so this comes from the fact that God said it's not good for man to be alone. And he said that right after he made the first human on earth, right? So this is really important. God was like, this is so important that I'm making another human, because it's not good for man to be alone. So we need people. And you guys are all, again, even in the midst of helping, you can't shoulder the weight alone. It is too heavy of a burden to bear, because that's what those moms were doing, where we all said that's impossible, right? We can't just shift the burden from one human to the next. We need to spread it out. So I'm going to tell you a story here. I don't know if any of you have heard of Brene Brown, but she writes a lot of books. She's very wise in the field of psychology and connection and people. And so she has this story. You can find it on a TED Talk. I would have thrown the TED Talk video in here, but I looked for a long time and couldn't find the right clip at just the right moment where she's telling the story. So the brief synopsis of the story is that there was these women in this village, in this small village in Africa, and they all went every day in the afternoon down to the river. They were a really poor community, and they all washed their clothes in the river together. And the women every day, they would laugh together, sometimes until they cried, right? They'd ask questions about how that they were doing, and chat with each other and just enjoy each other's company while they washed the clothes. And so eventually, these women and this community who is really, really poor, clothes that have holes in them, living in dirt huts, right? They're so happy. But eventually this hardworking mentality, they've learned that agriculture, they can grow fruit in their community, and they can sell it to a neighboring community that doesn't have the same water access that they do. And so they're making money, and they're becoming a prominent community. And so they get walls for their houses. They're not dirt huts anymore. They get running water and a well. They have electricity that comes in. They suddenly have access to appliances like a toaster and a washing machine, right? And so all these women, they're so excited. We've made it. We've worked really hard. We all don't have to go to the river anymore. And they noticed that the mental health of all of the women in the community had plummeted. I mean, it was like a 50% decrease in the realm of women who were struggling with depression and anxiety and mental health issues. And they brought in some, big names to try to study what's going on here. And instead, the guy who he was like the village chief, he said, well, you don't have to do a study on this. Like, we already know what the problem is. When we build our walls, right, we stay isolated. So these women were in community with each other before and sharing life together, but they got walls on their houses and they got washing machines, which should be, right? It seems like a good thing, but they were separated. They were lacking the community that they had, which is what kept them all in such great spirits. So they were happier when they were living in poverty and in community than what their mental health was when they were wealthy and had appliances. So from that aspect, we want to look at from infancy to 90 or 102, however long you live, right? Every human is looking to be seen, soothed, and safe. And that includes you and your family, right? You're needing those things just as much as everybody else is. Which brings us to, you need a village. So how do we find, right? Like there's the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child, right? How do you find, or how do you identify who are the people who are in your village who, in the moments when things are hard, are willing to step in and help offer you the things that you need? So volunteers who are going to step up and say yes. And that might be that you need somebody who is going to provide respite care for you, right? If you have, and this isn't common, but what if you had a hosting that lasted 3 months and you have a family event that you need to go to and it's out of state and mom doesn't really want the kids to go out of state, or that family event is going to be really overwhelming for those kids in poverty who get overstimulated, right? Who is it that's like, yes, absolutely, we'll take the kids for that weekend? Or even if it's like, we'll take the kids that you're hosting for one night, for a date night, right? And I do want to preface that in the realm of, while you're thinking of these people, we want your people to help you. That's really, really important. If your people are going to be doing things like spending one-on-one time with the kids who are in the program, we have some quick rules and training, brief training that they have to go through. So if they're going to be one-on-one with the kids doing respite, we need to have a background check for them, right? So if you already know who those people are, send them the information, or we'll send them the rest or the background check information so that they can already get background checked, so they're ready to go if you need them. Transportation. If you already have kids and your kids go to a different school than the kids who you're taking a hosting for, they might get out at the same time on different sides of town. And that's going to be pretty hard for you to be in two places at the same time. And so you might need help transporting the kids, right? You might need help with them picking kids up. So if somebody's going to transport kids, right, and you're not in the car with them, we want them to do a distracted driver training. We want them to briefly go over and make sure if the kid has a car seat, they know how to install a car seat, right? And they have to be background checked. So those are some of the instances where your people, we want to keep everyone safe, kids in our care and you, right? We don't want parents coming back and saying, oh gosh, you used your people and something happened to my child. It's a safety net for you. You might need meals, right? You might suddenly take these extra kids in and you're trying to create a safe place for them and give them felt safety. And you don't really have the opportunity to spend 30 minutes to an hour making a meal for everybody. And it would be such a blessing if someone just dropped one off for you. Again, the list can go on and on. Maybe you need somebody to help come tutor the kids. You guys will know what you feel like specifically are your needs or ways that you feel loved, and your people will know that too. An instance of like how you know, right, that you have those people would be, I had a time frame a couple weeks ago where I did respite for 3 foster kiddos. Again, not families together, 3 foster kids. And the day that I picked them up, so I picked them up, and in my car on the way to my house, they vomited. There's 3 of them, right? 8 months old, 2 years old, 4 years old. They are vomiting uncontrollably in the car as we're driving home. Like we're pulling over and stripping off all of their clothes, and they rode home with just blankets on in their diapers and underwear because we are so sick. And so you know, we obviously not comfortable for them to be sick with somebody who's not their parent, but like, I'm what you got right now. And so we get to my driveway, and I didn't even pull the car into the garage because, again, it's hot and sticky, and I didn't really want the vomit to, you know, soak into the seats. You guys all know, like when the kids throw up in the car seat, it just, that vomit smell permeates, right? And so I parked the car in the driveway, and I'm trying to carry all these babies in who are, you know, like naked minus diapers and underwear. And my people, some of my people are my neighbors. My neighbor Brian sees this. He also knows that I don't normally have these 3 children in my care. And so he comes running over and he says, "Hey, I noticed you got something going on. How can I help?" And I explained, "Hey, we're really sick right now, and I just need to get all of these kiddos inside." And he said, "Leave your car out. I'll take care of it." Right. And so he comes over, and I don't even know what Brian's magic vomit cleaner is, but we all need it, is what I'm telling you, because my car did not smell like vomit at all. Right. But like, he took care of that in case I needed to get back in the car with those kids to get them to a doctor. Right. I can't just throw them in the vomity car again. And so he just did it. So I'm able to come inside with the kids. And at this point, you know, I try to get them dressed because I'm optimistic, right? Like, oh, we are going to be fine. We vomited everything out in the car. Things are going to be great. And it is not. I mean, I changed my clothes 8 times in an hour because of the amount of, I mean, like, not just like, you know, runny puke, but like gross puke. And I'm changing their clothes, and you guys know, like, changing an 8-month-old frequently, that's just not worth it. Their arms are all wiggly, and 2-year-olds are like, "Get away from me." And they're all feeling sick. So we just strip everybody down, and I'm like, I'm just going to wrap them in towels and blankets. And as we vomit, we'll just wipe it up. We'll throw it in the washing machine. Like, this is going to be great. We're doing good. Until I ran out of blankets and towels, right? There's 3 of them, and this is a lot of vomit that we're dealing with. And at this point, I'm pretty sure that we all have fevers, but I don't have a thermometer that is appropriate for children in the realm of, like, I can't get them to stick a thing underneath their tongue or like hold their arms still for long enough. And so I called my people. I didn't call them, I texted them because, you know, I'm dealing with the vomit. And so I said, "Hey, I'm going to need more towels and more blankets, and I need a baby thermometer. Can you hook me up?" And they said, "Yeah, absolutely." And they brought it and dropped it off at my house. And it was a massive amount, right? Because my washing machine can't keep up. It can only go so fast. And so now I know that in fact we have fevers because I have a thermometer. And thankfully at this point, another neighbor notices, like, oh, there's something going on over there, right? And so my neighbor Dawn, who happens to be a nurse, she comes over and goes, "Hey, I noticed there's been a lot of people stopping by. Do you need something?" I said, "Yeah, we all have fevers, and I don't have any kid medicine. And I also don't even know what I'm allowed to give an 8-month-old, right? Because, like, I'm not this child's parent, and we never talked through how much of this med am I allowed to give him." And she said, "Give me a few minutes, I'll be right back." And she runs across the street and comes back with a rotating schedule of meds that she hands me, and then writes down per child how much I'm supposed to give each kid to get their fevers down. Right? So again, we just have the people pouring in. So then I'm sending all the kids, even though they're sick, because they have to go, they go to their visit with their mom. And their visit with their mom, right? This is foster care, so not families together. She's still in crisis in foster care. Mom can't afford diapers or wipes. And so you always send diapers and wipes with to the visit. Well, when I picked the kids up, they had no idea the kids were going to get sick, right? So I got sent with a certain number of diapers and wipes, which at this point we're vomiting out the front and things are coming out the back end too. Right? So I'm going through a lot of diapers and wipes, but I send what I got to mom. And unfortunately, the kids had an accident on visit with mom, and mom used up all of the wipes except for one. Now I've got 3 kids, and the kids come home an hour after bedtime because mom works, so her visit goes late. And so my choices at this point are, right, like, I know every single one of them has woken up every day with a horrible blowout, and I need wipes. I'm not going to be able to get by with one wipe in the morning before we can go get wipes. And so I either have to pick all the kids out who are really sick and expose them to everybody else an hour past their bedtime to get wipes, or I can just text one of my people. So I text my small group because we've got a lot of moms with young kids, right? And I say, hey guys, I just need one package of wipes to get me by until tomorrow morning where we can go buy wipes. And do you think that they made me return the wipes? No, absolutely not. I had multiple packages of wipes on my doorstep in 3 minutes. And then they proceeded to be like, hey, do you need anything else? And so one of them said, you know what? I'll bring over chicken noodle soup and some Pedialyte for the kids. Right? So your people, if you have invested time with your people, your village will show up. And sometimes you don't even realize who your village is, but you need them, right? Because if I was in that moment and I didn't have any of those people, that scenario would have looked a whole lot different. But instead, I could just love on those kids and keep them safe. And they walked away and they were like, oh yeah, they went to dad and was like, oh yeah, it was great. We had a great time, you know? And I'm like, I don't know if I would call that a great time, but they felt safe, right? Like that was, so our only job in those moments is we're focusing on keeping the kids safe, and your community and your specific care community is focused on what do you guys need? Oh, I also forgot they cared about me too. And somebody knew that like I wasn't sleeping because, you know, I had to hold the baby all night long for her to sleep. So they brought me coffee and sweet tea and just all of my favorite drinks and caffeine because they said, oh yeah, you're doing the hard things. We know you love this, right? So people who know you. Okay, so with our community to identify, and this is where you're going to get into on your, we're touching on these things briefly. So for your homework, you know, your acquaintances. That's like if you send out Christmas cards, right? It's the people you send Christmas cards to. Ballpark, it's probably 150 people. It's people that you care about, you know, you maybe see once or twice a year. Maybe you don't, maybe it's old college friends, people that you love and you want to hear about their life, but you're not in day-to-day life all the time with them. Then we have your village. Now your village is that sweet spot of who's going to be your care community. So your village is probably about 50 people. Again, these are just ballpark numbers. It could be coworkers, it could be family members, neighbors, church, small group friends, anybody in that capacity. Again, the homework will ask you some very specific questions to think through those. And then you have your close friends. Sorry. Your close friends, they've actually done studies and you can only have, in the realm of really close friends, you can only have 2 to 5. 2 to 5 is the max number of actual deep close friends that any person is able to maintain. So close friends are like, they know everything, right? They know all of the struggles. They are in this with you. They're as close as you can get. And you want at least 2, because if you just have 1, then you're becoming really codependent on one person, right? You're expecting them to be all things. So you need at least 2 close friends. And then God, you want to make sure that you have a good, solid relationship with God, right? He's the closest one to you. So the only way that you can help get people, so like, let's say you're worried your village is pretty small. Maybe you've got really good close friends, you've got a great relationship with God, got a lot of acquaintances, but your village is it's bare minimum, right? We're coming off of COVID. We were isolated for a while from our people. Closeness and proximity matters. And so you're not really sure who your village is. The only thing that's going to help you build your village or move somebody from an acquaintance to a village is time. And that sounds terrible as an adult because none of us have time, right? We are all busy. You guys have kids, you have jobs, you have lives. You're like, I don't have time to invest more time in other people who are supposed to be able to help me when I'm trying to invest time in the least of these, right? And so what does that look like in your day-to-day life? I would say making sure that your rhythms that you're already doing, try to include someone in those. So you're already going to the grocery store, like go to the grocery store at the same time as another person who you're like, oh, I'd really love for them to be in my village, or grow in a deeper relationship with them, right? You can chat while you're in the veggie aisle, you know? What are the things that you're already doing that will allow you to spend that time with them to help deepen that relationship? And then our very last one here, I'm going to show you all of them at the same time. But we all desire to have these 5 different things in relationships, and that's closeness, safety, feeling protected, having our relationships go deep, and being committed. So I used this diagram because I felt like those were good representations. So like a fire, right? You all creep in close to a fire if you're at a campfire, and that closeness, that proximity, it matters, right? So we can have people in community with us who maybe aren't physically here in Lincoln. And I love those people, right? They can Venmo me when I have those 3 foster kiddos and we're sick, but they can't be the ones who come and drop off the wipes. So that proximity, we got to have people who actually are close to us too, right? A combo. A barrier of that is busyness. So we let that creep in and prevent us from being close to people because we're busy, like, and isolated, like those moms in that village when they got their washing machines. We desire safety. And so we're not necessarily keeping our doors open, right? If we're feeling really safe, we've got open doors. So we're being transparent with people. We're letting them in to our mess and our pain, right? And obviously it's not easy sometimes to let people in to like, hey, I need help. So a barrier to that is pain or shame. We feel like we should be able to handle it all, even though we need people, right? Like God said, it's not good for man to be alone. We need people. The next one is protected, right? So the way that we feel protected is we throw up that pride barrier, right? I don't want anybody to see any of the smaller parts, or I feel like I'm incapable. But sometimes we actually need to be held accountable. So who are those people who are already in your life who are speaking honestly to you about things? Because they want you to grow, right? They care about where you're going and the choices that you're making. Going deep is so important in community. And a lot of times that involves a shared purpose. So who are the people already in your life who care about the things that you care about, right? It's like you're running a marathon and you're looking beside you. Who's in that marathon with you? Who also is passionate about families who are in crisis? And then a barrier to that is that sometimes we don't want to go deep because going deep can be really hard and it's not as much fun as doing shallow small talk about, what was the TikTok video of the week or whatever it is that we're small talking about. And then the last one is committed. So when we are, if we were all having a meal together at a table, right? Like we're committed to each other, we're committed to that time. And so that consistency, how do you make sure that you prioritize those community events or the opportunities that you can build community at and be consistent at those, as opposed to when we're not doing that, sometimes we're creating conflict, often with ourselves, of the fact that we want to be in community, right? And we need community. And then when a crisis happens, we weren't consistent. And so those people don't show up when we need them because we weren't consistent in those moments of spending time building that committed foundation. Okay, so on that note, again, went through that fast because we are definitely in the realm of being overtime and I want to respect your time. Your homework is going to dive deeper into that, but thinking through those things and diving into who are your people who are already there with you. And then if you feel like you don't have your people, how do you think through asking or deepening relationships? Because we need it. We all need it. Ronnie, did you have anything else you wanted to add? Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Anything that you want before you go? Do you all have the link? The homework is on that same page where the link was for, and the slides are up there too. So you can look back if you need refreshers on your community. And that's it. Thanks for hanging with us tonight, guys. Have a great night. We'll see you next week.
Good night.